Hello, everyone. My name is Romuald Demidenko. I was invited to the Others Independent Art Fair as part of the curatorial board. Thank you very much for having me here. I invited Emmanuel Lambion, a curator from Brussels, who is going to speak with me about some of the notions of independence, and when I heard this word independence, I started to think of the ways in which we think how independent curators like you are functioning or operating, how their modes of operating, how it actually what it is like to be independent today, and what it actually means, and is it even possible to think of being independent in this kind of late capitalist and very kind of complex let's say surrounding, with all these smaller and bigger entities and institutions and galleries, what it means actually to be independent. Is it even possible? Just to give you a bigger image of what Emmanuel is up to now, or what he is, or he had been doing in the past few months or years, I will only tell you that Emmanuel Lambion is now the deputy director of the ARBA-ESA, the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels, and he's also running the Maison Grégoire in Brussels, one of the oldest project spaces in Brussels. And is it true? Yes? Yeah, it's correct. Okay. I'm very stressed, I must say. So I don't want to make any mistakes. And so, yeah, I remember also you were working for Complan in Brussels, one of also these independent art spaces in Brussels, or project spaces, if not curator-run spaces. And I wanted to ask you what it actually means for you, independence, independency.
Well, thank you for Romuald for this invitation and long introduction, quite exhaustive. I think there are two things. Maybe it's useful also that at some point I speak about my parcours, which is between the independence. Well, it's like usually when I introduce myself, I give artistic mensurations like 51, 109, and 19, because I'm 51 years old. It's like I've been doing like 109 exhibitions out of 19 years of activity, and mostly out of a generated independent activity, with an anchorage since 2008 in this space, Maison Grégoire, which is a special space. It's a private space, but it's not funded. It's a small space, but it's very prestigious because it's a listed architecture by Henri van de Velde. And as you mentioned it exists as an independent art space since 95. So it's the second oldest in Brussels, more than 25 years after Établissement d'en face. And it's always a challenge to maintain what we call independence for a long period. Well, then I would like maybe to go back to your introduction about what is independence. You know, it's like, or is it possible to be independent? You've got like the moral approach to the word. Then I would say, no. Of course, nobody is and should not be and should not claim to be totally independent. I'm thinking about a work that I like very much it was like a public space intervention of an artist called Maarten van den Einde on the occasion of the anniversary in 2010. So it would have been the 50th anniversary of the independence of Congo, for instance, but also of a lot of African states. And it was this image, very simple. He had produced T-shirts, black T-shirts and white T-shirts. And on the white T-shirts, you had in. On the black T-shirts, you had dependence. And he had actually asked, he had been wearing, Maarten van den Einde, this Belgian guy and so on, in Kinshasa, the black t-shirt with dependents, and asked another artist from Congo to wear the white t-shirt within. And this work is so strong and powerful about expressing, you know, the yin and yang, about independence, dependence. It's impossible, actually, to be totally independent. What you related for, you know, it's like words that are a bit like used for me in an independent curator. Could be like a factual definition as somebody who is not employed by an institution. But of course, you know, to make one's living, you had to build up and find your own balance to have this possibility to be as free as possible in developing your projects. You mentioned, for instance, that I've got a day job, and more than a day job, I'm involved with the Royal Academy of Fine Arts. I'm deputy director. It's a very demanding job. And I do also, you know, curatorship for writing or commissions for other people and projects. And whatever I get, you know, in terms of extra funding, I reinvest it in my association, Visitway, to keep Maison Grégoire running. So in a way, yeah, I generate the funds to allow this activity to perpetuate. Because specifically, you know, it's just like there are some conditions attached to public funding, which creates another form of dependency, of reporting, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's like that you have to be open at least a certain number of days a week to aspire for a structural public funding as a independent art association, a Visitway an association in Belgium, which is not the case and which is not possible. So I think everybody has got a way to negotiate, find this way and build this way to negotiate this, within brackets, independence, which is, as I said, you know, for me, a utopian and impossible concept, but to have the impression that you can develop your project with as much freedom as you can achieve. So there would be for the independent curator. Then you've got like the concept of independent art space. I said, you know, it's also the same. As soon as you get some subsidies, and the more you get subsidies, the more you have reporting, and the more you can have pressure. So, yeah, and it's in the natural evolution of things, of careers, artist careers, curators' career developments, to kind of develop. But up to a point, yeah, the limit between this subjective feeling of independence, of being free of your choice, well, it comes into contradiction with the necessity to follow your artist, to grow, and then to have more means. And these means can be just given either by the private market or by public money, but it creates a form of independency. So it's also the case for the galleries or the art fairs, but as such, you know, there are so many like fairs, and some are call themselves not just as an adjective, independent art fair, but also, you know, the fair independent, you know, that has this aspiration to position itself as an independent as opposed to, whereas whether you are, and I believe in the diversity of platforms. I think it's good that in a city as Torino, during Artissima, which is of an excellent level, there is Dama, there is also the others. I mean, it's good to offer all these platforms, but I would say as such, everybody tends or aspires to the same thing. So I think like the concept of independent art fair is something maybe that, yeah, it's kind of also, in terms of terminology, something that is that asks, raises some question. I've seen also that you know, the others is also funding. It has got like a local, regional funding. So yeah, but that's a question maybe to ask to the organizers and not to you. But I don't know if I answered your questions. But
Yes, I think it's a great answer. It's a bit expanded and extensive. Thank you so much for this response. I was also thinking about the location, the settings. We are now in this former hospital, Ospedale Militare Alessandro Riberi, sorry. So I'm thinking about this location, I'm thinking about some other buildings. It's always this kind of a question in, it always is a question of having something new, having a fair, having an exhibition in a place which has its own history, which has its own unique kind of identity. And I was also thinking about the Maison Grégoire, which is a bit of an, it has its own unique identity. Actually it's a house. It's actually a house, which is actually a home of the owners, who are also
Yes.
art lovers, and they actually give this opportunity for the public to enter the house and see the exhibitions, which is very unique. And I'm thinking about of course it's a very different situation, but of course I think it's
So what is your question actually? Because
so actually my question is, because I think it's such a great place and such a unique location. So I'm thinking about all these locations. So I was thinking about Maison Grégoire, but maybe if you don't find it relatable.
No, I would say what I understand is, like you say, I think for us, everybody almost, artists, curators, always like exciting and a challenge to find new places, alternative places to develop a project. And certainly this location of a former military hospital of the others is one. As I understand, I don't know about the partitions that are in these barracks. What do they correspond exactly in the history of the building? But they offer, in the present case, a kind of booth structure that's not been altered. I don't think that the partition has been made by the organization. No, it was already like this. But anyway, so yeah, exciting alternative locations, always great to develop and explore. And yeah, in terms of curating, I think you come to another questions. I think, yeah, for me, for instance, it's like something very important to inscribe a project in a space very, very specifically, in as much as, there are as many ways of being a curator as there are many ways of being an artist. And, some people like to have like discursive projects where everything is subordinated to a concept, an idea, a text, and so on. And, and I'm not judging, but I prefer, for me, curation is like creating a language, putting to the fore works by artists, being faithful to what they want to say or something, but also to add something. And the discourse that you create, in my view, as being a curator, is like meta-infralinguistic. You must create an encounter between works. That is an addition to the intention of the artist. People must feel it. And it's like, it depends. A good setting up of an exhibition can be, a question of millimeters. Two works can function together in a specific space, in the duration. So in this sense, I think also that being a curator and developing an exhibition is kind of performative gesture. It's time-based, actually. And it's time and space-based. And yeah, so it's very important to find the good inscription, physical, architectural, in a given architecture of the artworks for an exhibition, to create this relationship and make the visitors perceive, I'm speaking about group shows, when you've got like, works by very different artists that are put to the fore. Well, that's my approach. Then after, of course, you make text, you make the press release, you make the catalogs, and people, if they want, they can read whatever they want. But yeah, in my approach, the space is really important. And I've always explored, so I've been running this special house, which is inhabited since 2008, but before and still now, I'm always challenged by special places, whether they be, public space, markets, parkings, or stations, or whatever. When something is special, it's always a challenge also, yeah.
Yeah, because BN project was running in all these different locations, and they were kind of
Yeah,
like
so
kind of
there's-
activating these spaces which were maybe a little bit less kind of inhabited by some activities, and then
Yeah,
I think it
there's
was
a
the
side
way.
of, you know, of this activity which is linked to a project in the public space as a kind of personal and socio-political commitment attached to buildings, historical buildings where I developed these projects, and yeah.
Yeah, I like.
But you know, public space apprehended not like a work in the public space. Most often it's like concepts that are transmitted and transmit their meaning through websites. Because in a way, you know, just like the web is now the main area of public exchange and discourse. You know, it's immaterial projects which are incarnated by artworks, can be incarnated, but there are concepts and ideas for the project I developed for the public space. Projects and ideas incarnated by artworks, transmitted through websites, and allowing the possibility for people to reappropriate the concept.
I like very much the way in which you're describing this kind of time-based notion of an exhibition, and the way in which it kind of develops. It has to evolve, it has to like change, and the ways in which you're creating all this with all these kind of actors of the situation, and in the way in which this format kind of changes. And I think it's quite interesting to see how it develops, how it changes. Like the exhibition is not any longer an exhibition as a static format. I think it's quite interesting to see how it develops, and also I can see the difference in the way in which some of the new fairs are being described. They don't describe very often any longer themselves as independent art fairs, but they always kind of try to find new terminology and new kind of definitions for kind of, you know, embracing what they are doing. I think that's so interesting to see that they kind of also, yeah, they avoid the word independent, or because that's true what you were mentioning before, that actually we are not dependent any. I mean, we are
We're
not independent any longer,
we're not independent.
because we are so dependent. Or
what would be our activity without, you know, first of all the artist or the public or whatever. So let's not be independent.
Let's not be independent. Thank you so much for this.
But let's be autonomous as possible.
Let's try to be autonomous, independent. Maybe it's quite, yeah, it could be a good combination. Maybe we can continue in the like later on after we finish this conversation, because I know we're running out of time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Romualdo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Piacere.